The boy who shot himself and became a legend. Lil Wayne. 12 years old. A gun in his hand. A bullet in his own chest. That's not the origin story of a villain. That's the origin story of one of the greatest rappers who ever lived. By the time most kids are worrying about middle school, Dwayne Michael Carter Jr. had already almost died and decided right there on that floor that he was going to live loud enough to make it count. This is the real story of Lil Wayne. Not the tattoos, not the headlines, the pain underneath all of it. New Orleans doesn't hand out easy childhoods, and in the Hollygrove neighborhood in the early 1990s, growing up meant learning fast which streets not to walk down after dark. Dwayne was raised mostly by his mother. His father left when he was young, so early that Wayne would later say he considers himself to have been raised without one at all. No father to model manhood for him, no cushion if things went wrong. What he had instead was a notebook. By 8 years old, he was already writing rhymes, obsessively, constantly, filling pages before most kids could write a full paragraph. Music wasn't a hobby for him. It was the one thing in a chaotic world that he could control completely. Every word on that page was his. At 9, he caught the attention of Cash Money Records, a scrappy, independent New Orleans label run by brothers Brian "Birdman" Williams and Ronald "Slim" Williams. They weren't major label executives. They were hustlers who believed in raw talent from the block. And they saw something in this kid that made them sign him before he was even a teenager. For most children, that would be the beginning of a dream. For Dwayne, it became something closer to a replacement family. With Birdman in particular, stepping into a role that looked a lot like a father figure. It's a relationship that would define his life for the next 2 decades, and eventually almost destroy him. But before any of that unfolded, before the fame, before the empire, there was a moment that nearly ended everything. On his 12th birthday, alone in his mother's house, Dwayne picked up a 9mm handgun and shot himself in the chest. He survived only because a police officer happened to be nearby and got him to the hospital in time. To this day, the full truth of that moment is something only Dwayne really knows. He has described it different ways over the years, as an accident, as a message, as the lowest point of a childhood that had already asked too much of him too soon. What's not in dispute is this. A 12-year-old boy nearly died in that house, and the boy who walked out of the hospital afterward was not the same one who walked in. He has said in the years since that the bullet still sits in his body today, a permanent reminder, proof that he survived something he was never supposed to talk about out loud, until he decided to build a career telling the truth about it anyway. That's the foundation everything else was built on. Not comfort, not stability, survival. By his mid-teens, Dwayne, now going by Lil Wayne, was recording as part of the Hot Boys, Cash Money's flagship group alongside Juvenile, BG, and Turk. He was the youngest member by far. While his friends were figuring out high school, he was in the studio until sunrise, learning how to build a verse, how to hold a room, how to survive in an industry that chews up child stars and rarely spits them back out intact. He didn't just survive it, he outlasted every one of them. While the other hot boys faded, through legal trouble, through fallouts, through the simple math of an industry that moves on, Wayne kept working. Album after album, guest verse after guest verse. He wasn't the flashiest lyricist in the early 2000s, but he was relentless, and relentless is its own kind of talent. Then came the mixtape run. Between roughly 2005 and 2007, Wayne released an avalanche of free mixtapes. So much material at such a punishing pace that industry insiders started calling him the best rapper alive, not as a compliment, but as a simple statement of fact. He wasn't chasing radio hits, he was proving, tape after tape, that he could out-rap anyone in the building. It worked. By 2008, when he finally released The Carter III as an official studio album, the anticipation had built into something close to hysteria. The album sold roughly 1 million copies in its first week alone, a number that felt almost impossible in the declining CD era. Critics who had once dismissed him as a southern rap novelty were suddenly calling him one of the most important artists of his generation. The kid from Hollygrove, who almost didn't make it to 13, was now, by every measure, one of the biggest musicians on the planet. But Wayne didn't stop at his own success. He turned around and built something bigger, a label of his own, Young Money Entertainment, and started doing for other young artists what Cash Money had once done for him. He signed a Canadian former child actor nobody in hip-hop was taking seriously yet, named Drake. He signed a fierce, unproven artist out of Queens named Nicki Minaj. Both of them would go on to become two of the most successful artists of the 21st century, and both of them, by their own accounts, credit Wayne as the reason the door ever opened. This was the peak. The pain of Hollygrove had been converted into an empire. It would not stay that way for long. Success didn't fix what came before it. It just gave the damage a bigger stage to happen on. In 2007, Wayne was arrested on weapons charges after police found a gun on his tour bus in New York. It took years to wind through the courts, but in 2010, at the absolute height of his commercial power, with the Carter III still dominating, he reported to Rikers Island to serve an 8-month sentence. Picture that. The best-selling artist in the country walking into one of the most notorious jails in America, while his albums kept climbing the charts without him. He served his time, he came out, and almost immediately, a new kind of trouble started closing in. This one from inside his own body. Wayne has epilepsy, and over the years that followed, he suffered a string of seizures severe enough to hospitalize him. In 2012, in 2013, and again in 2016, when reports described him being rushed to the hospital after multiple seizures in a single day. Serious enough that some outlets briefly reported he'd been read his last rites. For years, speculation swirled about whether his well-documented use of promethazine-based cough syrup, the lean so many southern rappers of his generation were open about, was connected. Wayne has never fully confirmed that connection, but he has been candid that those years were some of the darkest of his adult life. A body that had already survived a bullet at 12 was now fighting itself in public, one hospitalization at a time. And then the family he'd built his entire career on turned into a courtroom. The relationship with Birdman, the man who had signed him as a child, who had stood in for the father he never had, collapsed into one of the ugliest legal fights hip-hop has ever seen. Wayne accused Cash Money of withholding tens of millions of dollars in royalties and blocking the release of The Carter V, the album fans had been waiting years for. He publicly declared himself a prisoner to a label run by someone he once called family. The lawsuit dragged on for years, aired out in public, verse by diss track by press statement. Think about the weight of that. The man who filled the void left by his real father had become the person he now had to sue just to release his own music and just to be paid for the work of his own life. It's the kind of betrayal that ends careers, that breaks people permanently. Wayne kept going anyway. In 2018, after years of legal war, Wayne and Cash Money finally reached a settlement. He walked away with a massive payout, and, more importantly, with The Carter V finally in fans' hands. debuting at #1 on the charts a full decade after its predecessor had changed his life. A decade of fighting for one album, and when it finally came, it went straight to #1. That's not a comeback story in the Hollywood sense, no single triumphant moment where everything is suddenly fixed. It's messier and more real than that. Wayne still tours, he's still making music into his 40s, in an industry that usually discards its stars decades before that. He's weathered more health scares, more controversies, more headlines than most artists could survive once, let alone repeatedly. And the family tree he planted with Young Money never stopped growing. Drake became arguably the most commercially dominant rapper of the streaming era. Nicki Minaj became one of the most influential women in hip-hop history. Neither of their stories exists without a Rikers Island surviving, epilepsy-fighting, lawsuit-scarred man from Hollygrove deciding, against every reasonable expectation, to believe in them. Here's what the tabloid headlines never really capture. A kid who nearly died at 12, by his own hand, in a house with no father in it. A teenager raised inside a record label instead of a childhood. A man who went from platinum plaques to a jail cell, to a hospital bed, to a courtroom, against the closest thing he had to family, and kept writing through every single one of those chapters. Lil Wayne's music was never really about the money or the fame, even when it looked like it was. Underneath all of it was always the same message, said 1,000 different ways. I was supposed to disappear, and I didn't. That's not a rap career. That's survival with a microphone in front of it. This has been Pain and Bars, where pain becomes legacy.